Hi, my name's Venora. Last Thanksgiving, my brother stood up in front of everyone, the cousins, the neighbors, even my mother, and said I was a disgrace to this family. They all stayed quiet. Not one person looked my way. What they didn't know was that behind their silence, there was a secret, a hidden will, a stolen name, and years of betrayal dressed up as love. I thought I lost everything that night, but what I found was far worse. I pulled up to Mark's house just as the sun was dipping behind the bare trees. The driveway was already full, so I parked halfway down the street and walked the rest, clutching the pie tin with both hands. Pumpkin, store-bought crust, but the filling was mine. It was my way of saying I still tried. The scent of roasted turkey hit me the second I stepped through the door, but no one looked up. My brother was in the living room, snapping pictures with his kids, laughing loud like he was auditioning for a Thanksgiving commercial. I stood in the entryway, pie in hand, waiting. A cold draft slid down my back, and I finally cleared my throat. Mom looked over from the couch. She gave a half smile and turned back to her phone. "Hey, Darlene," someone mumbled. "A niece, maybe. She's always late." I checked my watch. I was 10 minutes early. I made my way to the dining room. The table was beautifully set, folded napkins shaped like autumn leaves, name cards handwritten in gold ink. Everyone had a place, except me. At the far end, next to the kids' table, there was a plate and a plain white napkin. No name. I set the pie down. Forced a smile. Sat. "You're early," Mark said as he walked by, not stopping. "That's a first." I didn't answer. What was there to say? Dinner moved slowly. Talk circled around mortgages, new cars, a cousin's third baby. I nodded, smiled when needed. Dad asked if I was still doing that painting thing, as if I'd picked up finger painting between shifts at Walmart. I mentioned a recent show in Charlottesville. He laughed, said, "Well, I guess someone has to chase dreams." Mark called me, the difficult one, twice. Once to his wife, once to the dog, as a joke. No one laughed, but no one stopped him either. I offered to help carry dishes. My sister-in-law placed a hand on my arm. "It's fine, sweetie. We've got it handled." Of course they did. The meal started with Mark standing, glass raised. "To family," he said, "to those who carry the legacy forward." Glasses clinked. I lifted mine halfway, but no one looked. Not one pair of eyes. I lowered it again. Legacy. I thought about the nights I spent sleeping on a pull-out beside Dad's hospital bed, the bills I covered when Mark couldn't that year, the birthdays I never missed while they all built fences around their lives. I made a joke, something about Mark's legacy being his awful barbecue sauce. It died before it reached the end of the table. Family isn't blood, I thought. It's who remembers you when you're not useful anymore. I looked around. Everyone smiling. Forks tapping. My hands curled in my lap. Then came dessert. Mark stood again. Cleared his throat like he was about to deliver a eulogy. "I just want to thank everyone," he began, "for being part of what makes this family strong. For carrying our name with pride. And for upholding the values we were raised with." I knew something was coming. My spine straightened. My pie slice sat untouched. "And to those who've strayed from that," he paused, looked straight at me, "who've chosen a different path, I just hope you find your way back someday." I didn't blink. Then louder. "You're a disgrace to this family." The room stopped breathing. Even the TV went quiet. No one moved. No one spoke. Then, from the kids' end, soft giggles. My youngest cousin bit her lip to stop the laugh. Her brother didn't bother. My mother looked down at her plate. That was the moment. The truth finally said aloud, dressed in Sunday best hypocrisy. Not whispered in back rooms. Not passed through glances. I stood, picked up my glass of water. "Then I suppose I'll stop disgracing you with my presence." I didn't wait. As I passed the hallway mirror, I caught my reflection. Pale, shaking, but upright. "Always the drama queen," Mark muttered behind me. At the door, I turned halfway. Just enough for my voice to carry. "You built a family out of lies and called it legacy. I built a life out of truth and called it freedom." Silence. Even the kids stopped chewing. I walked out, each step on the tile like a countdown. 1, 2, 3. Outside, the cold slapped me awake. I stood still, inhaled deep, watched my breath hang in the air like smoke from a small fire no one noticed was burning. I looked back through the window. They were laughing again. Forks rising, glasses clinking, like I'd never been there at all. I whispered to myself, "This time, I won't stay quiet." The morning after Thanksgiving, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand. I didn't want to look. But it kept going, short bursts every few seconds, like the world was trying to shake me awake. I sat up on the couch. I hadn't even made it to the bed last night. My pie tin was still by the door, untouched. I reached for my phone. Dozens of notifications, group chats, missed calls, messages from cousins I hadn't heard from in months. Not a single apology. One message stood out. "Ellie, my cousin who always tried to play peacekeeper. You could have handled it better." That was it. I stared at it. Coffee sat cold in my hand. My eyes burned from too little sleep and too much replaying. Mark's voice echoed again in my skull. "You're a disgrace to this family." That sentence had weight. It didn't drift away like smoke. It sat heavy in the room, still hanging from the ceiling like grease. There was a thin scratch along my forearm. I hadn't noticed it last night. Must have brushed something leaving in a hurry. It didn't hurt, but seeing it made something inside me stir. Like my body had caught the damage my heart missed. A voicemail from my mother. 17 seconds long. "Darlene, I saw your face when he said that. I don't want this dragged out. Just call him. Or don't. But don't make a thing of it." That was all. I opened the messaging app. Typed out a text to Mark. Deleted it. Opened my email, started writing a message. Deleted that too. Words didn't work here. Silence had always been the family currency. Say nothing, pretend nothing, and hope it passes. I wrapped the blanket tighter around myself. My apartment was cold in that damp way Richmond gets in late November. Not winter yet, but enough to keep you from feeling comfortable. 10 years ago, I skipped Thanksgiving for the first time. I'd been sick, genuinely sick, but by the time I heard the whispers, I wasn't sure anyone believed me. "Darlene's being dramatic," someone had said. It spread fast. Like that was easier than wondering why I didn't want to be there. That same year, Dad had moved in with Mark after retiring. Just for a while, they said. But that, while, turned permanent. Suddenly, Mark had keys, bank permissions, even the family photo albums. I remember asking Mom why I wasn't looped into those decisions. "You're not the practical one," she said. Not the practical one. Like that explained everything. That was when I first realized disagreement meant disrespect in this family. If you challenged the version of the story everyone agreed to repeat, you were disloyal. Once, I'd come home early from a trip and heard them talking, Mark and my parents. "She's too unstable to be trusted with anything serious," Mark had said. "The house, the accounts, it's not safe." They hadn't noticed me standing in the hallway. That moment didn't break me. But something inside turned off. I stopped trying to be invited to the table. I just kept showing up out of obligation. Later that morning, someone knocked on my door. It was Mrs. Grant, my elderly neighbor. She handed me a small Tupperware. "Stuffing. Leftovers. I always make too much." She looked at me for a moment. "You okay, honey?" I must have looked worse than I felt. "I'm fine," I lied. "Well," she said, placing a hand on my arm, "blood makes you related. Loyalty makes you family. Don't confuse the two." After she left, I stood there a long while. Maybe silence was our real tradition. Not turkey, not legacy, just holding everything in until it fossilized. I began cleaning up the kitchen out of restlessness. That's when I found the envelope. It was buried under a pile of junk mail, still sealed. My name, my father's handwriting. Inside, a single slip of paper. Just one line. "Some things aren't as simple as they look. Stay out of it." No date, no signature. It didn't scare me. It confused me. Dad had written this? When? About what? Had he known Mark would pull that stunt last night? Or was it about something else? Worse, had he agreed with it? I sat down, stared at the note, and felt an ache in my chest that wasn't sadness. It was recognition. That moment you realize someone you thought would protect you might have been watching from the sidelines all along. By late afternoon, I opened my laptop. Not for revenge. Not yet. I just needed to see things clearly. Patterns, emails, bank records I'd once had access to, even if just in passing. I made a folder. Started listing dates. Moments that had seemed small at the time, being left off a group text, a check that never got repaid, being forgotten on a joint family gift. Each dot connected to another. And once I saw the pattern, it wouldn't disappear. Maya Angelou's quote floated into my head: when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. But I hadn't believed them. I kept giving chances, kept showing up, kept folding myself smaller to fit into their version of a daughter, a sister. Was I difficult? Maybe, but difficult wasn't the problem. Difficult meant honest. Difficult meant unafraid to ask why. And maybe that's what they couldn't stand. I stared at the blinking cursor for a while. Typed out one sentence. Truth doesn't scream, it just gathers proof. I saved the file under a new folder, Thanksgiving files. It was empty, but not for long. That night, I lit a candle. Something I picked up after therapy, marking small moments of reclaiming yourself. Not for Instagram, just for me. The flame flickered. My phone buzzed. Ellie again. Just one sentence this time. Mark's planning something. Be careful. I arrived at my apartment just after dusk. The November light in Richmond had already tipped into darkness. I set the front door behind me, placed my coat on the rack, and sat in the living room, the pie tin still in the kitchen sink, a reminder of the night I left behind. I opened the old wooden photo box that I'd kept since childhood. Faded edges, worn corners. I reached for a photograph of us all at the lake house, Dad and Mom in the center, Mark grinning beside them, me standing slightly to the side. Part of me thought I'd find comfort here in familiar faces. Instead, I pulled aside a letter folded neatly behind the photo. My grandmother's handwriting. The message: do not let the house become his world. He watches the name more than he loves the daughter. My breath slowed. I held the letter longer than I expected. I remembered when Dad told everyone the house should stay in Mark's name, for simplicity, after his surgery. I asked him why. His answer: it's easier this way. Easier. The word stung. Because ease for him meant exclusion for me. I saw it then. The peace they claimed was built on convenience. Lukewarm dinners. Smiles that didn't reach their eyes. A legacy staged for cameras. The next morning I drove past the house we grew up in. The modest colonial nestled behind trimmed hedges and a quiet sidewalk. Mark's car sat in the driveway. I stopped and sat in the passenger seat of my own car. I didn't knock. Instead, I walked around to the mailbox. The name, Hargrave, still glowed on the brass plate, as though I, the daughter who raised our parents in hard times, never existed. A neighbor walked by and casually said, "Mark told us the house is his outright now. Didn't your father sign it over?" I nodded, said nothing. My pulse slowed. My mind sharpened. Truth doesn't need to shout, I thought, but it sure deserves to speak. That moment changed me. What people saw as stability was curated. What people believed as legacy was polished. Later, back in the apartment, my inbox pinged. Ellie's name flashed on the screen. She'd sent a voice memo. I plugged in my headphones. It was Dad's voice, the voice I missed and half feared. He said, trembling, "Handle things quietly. If Darlene ever contests the trust, make sure things stay clean." He sounded small, afraid. The audio paused and replayed in my mind. Not hate, fear. My father, silent while his daughter was erased. My grief sharpened into something sharper, not just for loss, but for complicity. The memo cracked open the lid of a truth I had ignored. Silence wasn't protection. It was permission. That night I called Ellie. She admitted she was scared. She said, "He controls too much, Mark does." I didn't know how deep until now. I told her, "I don't want to burn it down. I want to stop pretending I didn't smell the smoke." I drafted an email to the family titled, "Setting the Record Straight." I didn't send it yet. But I wrote it. I researched trust laws, family protections. Not to sue, just to know. Knowing felt like armor. The framed photo I keep, me with a paper crown at a long ago Thanksgiving game, sat on my dresser. I stared at it. I whispered, "They crowned the wrong heir." Then I turned the lights off and lit a candle. I placed it on the windowsill and watched the flame flicker. Outside the window, lights glowed in houses where I used to belong. But tonight I knew, I wasn't returning. I was starting. My phone buzzed. Ellie's name again. Mark's making a move. Be ready. My heart skipped. The war wasn't tomorrow. It was already here. The steeple bells stopped ringing just as I pulled into the church parking lot. Sunday afternoon cast in gray light, the kind that cracks open old wounds. I took a deep breath, thinking maybe I was seeking closure, or maybe just a place that still felt real. My parents had brought us here for years, it was sacred ground once. Now it felt like a stage for silence. Inside, the pastor climbed the steps and spoke of forgiveness, of keeping peace even when your soul protests. Sitting in the back pew, I clenched the hymnal until my fingers hurt. Because in my family, peace never meant justice, it meant skipping over the truth. I glanced around and realized how many of the people I grew up with only knew the version of us Mark handed out. Perfect daughter gone quiet. Dutiful son saved the day. I leaned forward and thought, there are two kinds of liars. Those who speak falsely, and those who stay quiet when truth is bleeding out. After the service I stood outside and faced Mrs. Hendricks from grade school. I heard Mark took care of everything after your father passed. That's so generous, she said. I let the words hang a moment, then replied, generosity means giving something that's yours to give, not something you stole. Her jaw dropped. I didn't fix it. When we met after church, the air had already shifted. Mark leaned against his SUV, Avis standing beside him, arms crossed like a shield. I approached slowly, carrying two items, the trust document I'd discovered, and the old family photo where I was cropped out. His smile flickered. Darlene, he said, in calm that mocked, we should talk. Great, I replied, I've been ready. He shifted his weight. You're making this harder than it needs to be. No, I said quietly, I'm making it clearer. I held the paperwork out. You changed the trust after Dad died. You edited the record. You digitally erased me from our own history. Mark's laugh rang hollow. You're overreacting. No one else cares about this. I met his eyes. Then let's find out how much truth costs when it's told out loud. I paused. People were walking by now. Neighbors, churchgoers. Their eyes flicked our way. The mask slipped from his face. I pressed on. You forged Dad's signature. You hid the voice memo where he said, handle things quietly. That was fear, Mark. Not love. Avis stepped back. What recording? She whispered. He didn't answer. His silence echoed like a verdict. Word spread fast. By the time light turned pink over the rooftops, the rumor mill had kicked into motion. Texts came in. Did you hear what happened after service? Is it true about the amendment? I sat on my porch later, storm of emotions spinning, and a church elder called. Darlene, he said softly, if what you told them today is true, then you're not the one causing the division. The lie is. His words felt like a key turning in a lock. I pulled out my journal and wrote, every truth told out loud becomes a small revolution. That night I found myself replaying a memory from years ago, 20-something, Thanksgiving, trying to speak and being told, why would you ruin the family peace? I realized peace in that phrase wasn't calm, it was silence wearing a mask. I opened my laptop and drafted a new kind of message, not asking, but stating. Return what you took, or face exposure. I printed it and placed it on the kitchen counter, like a threat I meant to keep. Then I walked to the windowsill and lit a candle. Mom used to say it was for guiding lost souls back home. I didn't need guiding anymore, but I needed seeing. This time, I whispered into the flame, I won't wait for someone else to see the light. I'll hold it myself. The mail slot rattled just then. I crossed the room and picked up an envelope with no return address. Inside, a copy of the trust amendment we'd argued about. My father's name at the bottom, but the signature? All wrong. The loops, the slant of the H, not his. My hand trembled, but my mind sharpened. If he forged this, what else had he changed? What story had he rewritten to erase me? I folded the document, tucked it in my jacket, and stared at the candle flicker. Truth and loyalty, they couldn't live under the same roof anymore. I knew which one I was choosing. I sat at the kitchen table as afternoon light faded into a pale gray. Two laptops open, stacks of legal reference books piled high, mugs of coffee long half drunk. My apartment looked like a war room, papers strewn, cables snaking, phone buzzing with encrypted messages. I watched the scanned trust transfer document flicker on one screen. Mark's signature, notarized, dated just a month after Dad's surgery. I touched the screen, traced the loops of his name with my fingertip. The date didn't match Dad's medical record, he was incapacitated. I remembered Dad's voice. "I trust Mark," he'd said. I asked quietly, "Why wasn't I consulted?" He said, "Family matters are private." It wasn't neglect. It was manipulation built to keep me silent. I composed a note, encrypted, sent to Jolene. "Start making calls. They need to know." I leaned back, listened to the hum of my fridge, felt my blood drum in my ears. The stakes had changed. I wasn't bargaining anymore. I was fighting. Later that afternoon I entered the conference room at the law firm, neutral space I booked under D. Atlow Consulting. Mark walked in, surprise flickering behind his practiced calm. I was seated across from him, the folder between us heavy with meaning. He offered a smile. I offered a file. "You know how these things go," he said, shifting in his chair. "The board chose me for a reason." I leaned forward. Chosen by whom? On what basis? I slid the board minutes across. I was never invited. My name is listed as advisor, not beneficiary. He blinked. A beat of silence as papers rustled. "You should stop digging. This is family, not a courtroom," he told me. I didn't look away. When family becomes a courtroom, you don't change the venue, you change your role. He exhaled. The room flickered with tension. The quiet broke, because I refused to stay quiet. In early evening I walked near the James River, cool wind pressing against my face. The water moved slow and certain. My phone buzzed. Ellie's text. "Mark is already telling people you're unstable and desperate." Then a clip arrived. Mark's office, his voice loud in the background. "We'll just clean this mess up before she sees what she's done." His colleague snickered. My pulse jumped. If narrative meant everything, then he already had the microphone. I closed my eyes and inhaled deep. Fear flickered, but it receded, because I had something he didn't: clarity. I remembered that quote I'd tucked away. Vulnerability is not winning or losing, it's having the courage to show up when you can't control the outcome. I clicked reply. Public statement begins tomorrow. Back at the apartment, I sorted icons into 3 folders: family evidence, legal timeline, public outreach. I picked up the leaf-folded napkin, same one from years ago when I wasn't invited. I placed it beside the laptop. I called Maida Stroud. "Let's review these amendments at 8 a.m. sharp." I typed in my journal, "I will not wait for permission to define my worth." I sent Jolene another message. "Allies make noise. Victims hush until we're dead inside." I closed the files, sat back, watched the city lights blink on. I wasn't invisible anymore. Presence mattered. Late that night a knock at the door. Service courier. I signed for a large envelope. Inside, a USB stick and a note. "They're hiding more than you know." I plugged it in. File name Hargrave board minutes _2015 to 2020.pdf. My hand shook. This wasn't just about one trust or one house, it was system-wide. My mind sharpened. The air felt colder. I stared at the screen, the folder open, the title glaring. I whispered, "This is the next level." I walked into that fluorescent-lit town hall room knowing full well there'd be no turning back. Chairs were lined neatly, camera rigs set along the walls, and a long table up front where the Hargrave board members were already seated, trying too hard to look composed. Mark was front and center, eyes scanning the crowd. I stayed in the back, unnoticed, at least for now. He started with the usual lines: legacy, tradition, duty, family. I'd heard them my entire life, words meant to soothe and bind. But tonight, they felt more like a rope tightening around my neck. His voice was smooth, rehearsed, but I could hear the cracks underneath. Then it happened, on the screen behind him, a glitch. For a split second, then longer, a video clip played. My voice. My handwriting on the whiteboard. I was outlining the exact proposal Mark had claimed as his own for years. There was no mistaking it. The silence in the room was deafening. Mark's jaw tightened. A flicker of panic crossed his face. Someone coughed. The board shifted in their seats. I stood up slowly. "You took my work," I said, steady and clear, "my trust, and called it yours. Tonight, we fix that." The room held its breath. And just like that, the walls began to crack. The door to the side opened, and Otis Rankin stepped in. Tall, lean, graying around the edges, Otis looked tired, but determined. "I have something to say," he said, walking to the front. He glanced at me, nodded, then turned to the board. I was there. I saw it all. Darlene led that project, not Mark Hargrave. He connected his flash drive. The screen changed. Timestamps, calendar invites, my emails, signed deliverables. My name, my work. The gasps came next, small at first, then louder. One board member pushed his chair back. Another leaned toward her assistant, whispering. Mark's face? It wasn't anger this time, it was disbelief. A man so used to control, unraveling in front of people who once clapped for him. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just stood there. For years I waited, begged silently for someone to say it out loud. Tonight, I made sure they did. Outside in the hallway after the session, Mark shoved the door open so hard it bounced back. He gripped his phone, knuckles white. You're gonna regret this, he hissed, turning toward me. You've just destroyed everything Dad built. I stood my ground. No, I'm restoring what you quietly stole, one lie at a time. He stepped closer, rage in his eyes, breathing heavy. But I didn't flinch. I stepped back, calm. Violence? It wasn't needed. Precision was louder. The janitor stood at the end of the hallway, frozen with his mop midair. I caught his eye. He gave me a nod. Small, but enough. I went home with adrenaline still pumping through my arms. I played back the live stream on my laptop. Paused at the moment Mark's confidence cracked. Rewound. Played again. My voice was firm. My back straight. I didn't shrink. I opened a new recording on my phone. Tonight, I claimed my name back. I stopped asking. I stated. I deleted all the previous drafts of my statement. This one would go public. Straight into the church newsletter, the local paper, and anywhere else that used to publish stories about Mark Hargrave's leadership. On my coffee table, the old leaf pattern napkin lay stained. Red wine from someone's shaky hand had soaked into the fabric. The edges were frayed now. Years ago, I saw that napkin folded perfectly next to a plate I wasn't invited to eat from. Now it sat torn, imperfect but seen. My phone buzzed just after midnight. Message from an unknown number. They found the original trust minutes too. Ready for press release. I sat back, heart thudding, not from fear this time, but from knowing. This wasn't just a family rift. This was a reckoning. The courthouse walls had seen generations come and go. Mine wasn't supposed to count. But that morning, walking into the registrar's office, I knew something had shifted. Me, maybe. Or just the way I carried myself. The folder under my arm wasn't just paper. It was proof. The woman behind the counter wore glasses low on her nose. She barely looked up as she slid the sealed envelope across to me. These are now public record. I nodded, took it with both hands, then sat at the bench by the window. My fingers moved slow, careful. I unfolded the packet, eyes scanning, name after name, line after line. And then there it was. Venora D. Hargrave, listed first. Primary heir. Dated 5 years back. Right below it, another version, amended, signed again. This one with Mark's name alone. I felt the floor of every family dinner, every forced smile, every lie fall out from under me. And yet, I wasn't falling. Dad's voice returned in a whisper I hadn't heard in years. You deserve to carry the name with pride. He wasn't just talking about birthright. He was reminding me who I was before they buried me in silence. Outside, people moved like nothing had changed. Coffee cups in hand, laughter, someone scolding a child, and there I was, finally visible. Not because they let me in, but because I found the key they hoped I'd never hold. I joined the board meeting from the courthouse annex. No one expected me to show. Mark's voice greeted the room like always, controlled, rehearsed. I had no choice, he said. The family demanded stability. My screen lit up. I didn't wait. Stability you built by erasing me. He stiffened. Board members leaned closer to their screens. I held up the documents. Original trust. Sealed. Signed. Before your edit. The room shifted. A chair creaked. Merla looked down. Avis blinked away tears. You leaked proprietary financial data. Mark barked. No, I said. I uncovered the proprietary betrayal that rotted this family from the inside. Silence. The kind that doesn't wait for permission. I stood, adjusted the mic, and pulled out one last piece from my file, a personal check. Dad's name on the top line. My signature at the bottom. This, I said, was the final payment I gave before Dad passed. The last time I paid into a system that treated me like a liability. I placed it in front of the camera. No one moved. Outside, I could hear the shutters of press cameras picking it up. Mark broke. You think waving paper makes you right? I looked directly at him. No, but truth does. And this is the truth you tried to burn. No one spoke. The power didn't shift quietly, it cracked. After the meeting ended, I stepped outside. The courthouse doors closed behind me like the last chapter in a long, miserable book. Autumn leaves blew across the square, dry and brittle, catching on my shoes. I took out my phone, dialed Calder. Let's talk, I said. I'm ready for what's next. He didn't ask what happened. Just said, you're free when you choose to be. And I believed him. That evening, after stopping for groceries and ignoring 3 calls from Merla, I unlocked the door to my apartment. It smelled like wood polish and fresh air. The way new beginnings should. I sent Ellie a message. We didn't just survive the fire. We rebuilt from it. Then I unwrapped something from my suitcase, the old napkin with the folded leaf pattern. The one they used to set aside for guests, not family. I framed it, hung it above the desk. It used to be the symbol of how they left me out. Now, it's the mark of everything I reclaimed. I stood back, looked at it. I'm not the missing piece anymore, I whispered. I'm the one building the table now. Just as I sat down, my phone buzzed again. A news alert. Hargrave board under investigation, family trust in turmoil. I hovered over the share button. Then paused. This wasn't just my story now. It belonged to every girl who'd been told she wasn't enough. I smiled, set the phone down, and let the silence stay a while. The morning was slow, quiet, something I hadn't allowed myself in years. I sat on the balcony with a chipped mug of black coffee, the kind my dad used to make, staring out across the brick rooftops of Greenville. The sun hit them just right. It felt like the city was offering me a nod. One last nod. My phone buzzed on the table. I flipped it over without urgency. A news notification. Hargrave board under independent review. No gasp, no jolt. Just a breath, and a small smile I didn't need to hide from anymore. I leaned back, the metal chair creaking beneath me. I remembered that Thanksgiving when they sat me away from the main table, like I was some afterthought. Like I hadn't carried the same blood or built the same memories. That chair might have been smaller, but I remember how heavy it felt. Now I was sitting at a table of my own making. Back inside, I opened a small box I'd been dragging around since the day I left. Inside, tucked neatly, was that napkin. The leaf-folded one from that first night Calder and I talked at Darlene's. I hung it on the wall above my desk, right next to the framed photo of me signing my first consulting contract. The paper wasn't fancy, the pen barely worked, but that smile on my face? It told the whole story. I whispered to myself, the seat wasn't stolen. I just walked away, and built a better one. Later that week, while checking emails on a layover in Dallas, one stood out. Subject line. Invitation to speak, Leadership and Family Dynamics. Texas Chamber of Commerce. I read the first line twice before it sunk in. We would be honored to feature Venora Hargrave, daughter overlooked, turned architect of change. I blinked, then laughed, not out of disbelief, but because it felt right. My mind drifted back to those sleepless nights, pulling trust documents apart like puzzles. That audio file of Dad saying my name with purpose. That was the real inheritance. Not the check, not the titles, just the truth. I stood in front of the mirror that evening, hair pinned up, blazer pressed. Practicing. Power isn't given, I said to my reflection. It's reclaimed. Before leaving, I typed out a short message to Jolene. The kind of message that doesn't need a reply. From invisible to visible. Thank you for holding the mirror when I couldn't. That night, I stepped into the gala in Austin. No nerves, just purpose. I shook hands, some firm, some weak, all part of the dance. I made my way to the podium when they called my name. In my hand, that napkin. I laid it gently on the podium. Looked out at the room. Last November, I sat at a table where my name was missing. Where my voice was left out. Tonight, I paused, I sit at one I built. Silence, then applause, and flashes. But this time, the light wasn't harsh. It didn't expose me, it honored me. As I walked off the stage, Calder stood near the back, arms crossed, that same patient look he always carried. He pulled me into a hug. "Ready for the next chapter?" he asked softly. I nodded. "I'm not waiting for someone else's legacy anymore. I'm writing my own." We walked out together, the evening air cooler now. Austin hummed around us, cars, conversation, life. But all I could feel was direction. Back at the condo, a glass of water in hand, I sank into the couch. I FaceTimed Ellie and Zadie. Their laughter filled the room before I even spoke. Zadie asked, "You still mad at them?" I took a sip, thought about it. "No," I said. "I'm just free from needing to belong to them." Behind the camera, I could hear dishes clinking, Ellie teasing someone in the background. Home. Just not the kind I grew up in. I looked over at my planner. My next flights: consulting in Houston, keynote in Denver, retreat in Athens. Somehow that all seemed natural. I opened my journal, something I hadn't done in a long while. The past taught me how to be stolen from. The future will teach me how to own my story. I closed it, leaned back. The lights of Austin blurred outside my window, but they didn't feel out of reach. They felt like mine, earned, not given. Just as I was setting my phone down for the night, a text popped up. From an old contact I hadn't heard from in weeks. Board files vanish. Investigation deepens. I let out a breath, almost a chuckle. Then whispered to the room, "Truth finally gets the microphone." I turned off the lamp, lay back, and closed my eyes. The morning was slow, quiet, something I hadn't allowed myself in years. I sat on the balcony with a chipped mug of black coffee, the kind my dad used to make, staring out across the brick rooftops of Greenville. The sun hit them just right. It felt like the city was offering me a nod. One last nod. My phone buzzed on the table. I flipped it over without urgency. A news notification. Hargrave board under independent review. No gasp, no jolt. Just a breath, and a small smile I didn't need to hide from anymore. I leaned back, the metal chair creaking beneath me. I remembered that Thanksgiving when they sat me away from the main table, like I was some afterthought. Like I hadn't carried the same blood or built the same memories. That chair might have been smaller, but I remember how heavy it felt. Now I was sitting at a table of my own making. Back inside, I opened a small box I'd been dragging around since the day I left. Inside, tucked neatly, was that napkin. The leaf-folded one from that first night Calder and I talked at Darlene's. I hung it on the wall above my desk, right next to the framed photo of me signing my first consulting contract. The paper wasn't fancy, the pen barely worked, but that smile on my face? It told the whole story. I whispered to myself, the seat wasn't stolen. I just walked away, and built a better one. Later that week, while checking emails on a layover in Dallas, one stood out. Subject line: Invitation to speak, Leadership and Family Dynamics. Texas Chamber of Commerce. I read the first line twice before it sunk in. We would be honored to feature Venora Hargrave, daughter overlooked, turned architect of change. I blinked, then laughed, not out of disbelief, but because it felt right. My mind drifted back to those sleepless nights, pulling trust documents apart like puzzles. That audio file of Dad saying my name with purpose. That was the real inheritance. Not the check, not the titles, just the truth. I stood in front of the mirror that evening, hair pinned up, blazer pressed. Practicing. Power isn't given, I said to my reflection. It's reclaimed. Before leaving, I typed out a short message to Jolene. The kind of message that doesn't need a reply. From invisible to visible. Thank you for holding the mirror when I couldn't. That night, I stepped into the gala in Austin. No nerves, just purpose. I shook hands, some firm, some weak, all part of the dance. I made my way to the podium when they called my name. In my hand, that napkin. I laid it gently on the podium. Looked out at the room. Last November, I sat at a table where my name was missing. Where my voice was left out. Tonight, I paused, I sit at one I built. Silence, then applause, and flashes. But this time, the light wasn't harsh. It didn't expose me, it honored me. As I walked off the stage, Calder stood near the back, arms crossed, that same patient look he always carried. He pulled me into a hug. Ready for the next chapter? He asked softly. I nodded. I'm not waiting for someone else's legacy anymore. I'm writing my own. We walked out together, the evening air cooler now. Austin hummed around us, cars, conversation, life. But all I could feel was direction. Back at the condo, a glass of water in hand, I sank into the couch. I FaceTimed Ellie and Zadie. Their laughter filled the room before I even spoke. Zadie asked, "You still mad at them?" I took a sip, thought about it. "No," I said. "I'm just free from needing to belong to them." Behind the camera, I could hear dishes clinking, Ellie teasing someone in the background. Home. Just not the kind I grew up in. I looked over at my planner. My next flights: consulting in Houston, keynote in Denver, retreat in Athens. Somehow that all seemed natural. I opened my journal, something I hadn't done in a long while. The past taught me how to be stolen from. The future will teach me how to own my story. I closed it, leaned back. The lights of Austin blurred outside my window, but they didn't feel out of reach. They felt like mine, earned, not given. Just as I was setting my phone down for the night, a text popped up. From an old contact I hadn't heard from in weeks. Board files vanish. Investigation deepens. I let out a breath, almost a chuckle. Then whispered to the room, "Truth finally gets the microphone." I turned off the lamp, lay back, and closed my eyes.